Well, the protection of whistleblowers in the country has been criticized for not being up to standard. Even though those who blow the lid are protected, they often find themselves in danger. A case in point would, of course, be Babita Diokaran, who was gunned down outside her home in 2021 for flagging dodgy contracts at Tembisa Hospital. Let's now speak to Cynthia Stimpel. She's also a whistleblower and SAA's former head of Treasury. Thank you so much, Ms. Stimpel, for joining me this evening. Of course, you know, whistleblowing in this country, when it comes to corruption, this is such a key aspect in fighting corruption when it comes to whistleblowing in general. But it does feel that the system in general is just against whistleblowers.
Thank you for inviting me. Yes, we do have the Protected Disclosures Act, which should be used to protect whistleblowers, but it hasn't. And you're right, that whistleblowers have not been fully protected. Firstly, through the legislation, and secondly, through the behavior and the enforcement of the law from the various organizations who harass, victimize, and have reprisals against whistleblowers.
And then when we do take a look at the legislation in this country, what in your opinion should be done to make sure that whistleblowers are protected in the way that they should be protected?
What has transpired earlier this year in August is that the Department of Justice has put out a discussion document which Whistleblower House, together with many other civil societies like Alta, Corruption Watch, Gordon Institute of Business Science, and Amnesty International, and many others have responded to and given comments. In those comments, they've made certain sections of how to improve for whistleblowers. So if I might just go through a few, one would be that the protection firstly needs to be enforced because currently it's just a legislation and organizations just use it as a tick box exercise rather than enforcing it. Secondly is that the definition of the naming of whistleblowers doesn't come out strongly either, obviously, in the Protected Disclosures Act, and it's nowhere mentioned in the witness program, the Witness Act. So there it's to either align it or change the name as a defender of rights or against, telling the truth if one doesn't want to use the name whistleblower. Thirdly is that organizations who have harassed or victimized or are the perpetrators, there's no sanctions against them when they found that they were on the wrong side of the law, and yet the whistleblower has lost their jobs, their livelihood. They suffer, like Babita has, in losing their life, the ultimate sacrifice, for someone like her. And then there's also that when whistleblowers lose their jobs, they cannot find further employment unless they reinvent themselves, and many have lost their homes. So the repercussion and the knock-on effect of losing your home, going into debt, being blacklisted, they never recover. So how does one make reparations for that? And therefore one of the key areas is to look at reparations for whistleblowers in a form of either compensation or some whistleblower fund that needs to be set up to assist whistleblowers so they can get over their plight, or at least beyond the deep debt that they're in, and they can restart their lives.
And then, of course, Ms. Stimpel, you mentioned all of those things now, and it just makes me, think, of course, you get many, or we've heard of so many stories where, a whistleblower, they were in the public sector and then they now are without a job and they try and go to the private sector. And then, of course, the private sector will be saying things like, you maybe come with too much baggage. We don't want that, as part of our bigger company. So unfortunately, we're saying no to you at this point in time. But then you also now have the Public Interest SA who wants to, say, to all the heroes, basically, to recognize them with an award that they want to get going now. How do you feel about this award ceremony that they want to have for whistleblowers?
Personally, I think that whistleblowers need to be acknowledged, firstly, because they've taken a knock on behalf of the country. You know, it's them being loyal to the organization by speaking out, by telling the truth, by stopping wrongdoing or raising the awareness or the red flags around potential corruption or actual corruption that they've seen. So yes, they must be acknowledged, and they should be. The awards are awards that just as in recognition that I understand that Public Interest SA will be giving the whistleblowers. And that's a good thing, because the more we recognize them, the more we acknowledge them, we will find that more citizens will start speaking out. Because if one just looks at state capture at present, is that this didn't happen overnight. It was a period of probably 10 years or even longer. And in that period, it caused the demise of our country, that we've lost, according to the Zondo report, over 1.5 trillion rand, which could have been used for better schools, hospitals, infrastructure, our electricity, our water systems. All that could have been used far more effectively. So hence, yes, I feel that whistleblowers must be awarded, they must be recognized and must be acknowledged.
And we also don't talk about corporate whistleblowing very often. It's always, just the ones that we see in the public sector. But, are there some specific challenges for whistleblowing in the corporate sector?
Definitely. No, there are many in the public sector as well as in the private sector. What has been highlighted in the State Capture Commission is that even though they discussed and did the investigations in the public sector, there was enabling done by the private sector. So many banks implicated, many accountancy firms were implicated, many consultancy firms. And then when you look further, there is the normal corporate, as in businesses, even in small organizations like a non-government organization, NGO, or a civil society. Some have had their own issues where there has been either fraud or committed or some irregularities in their processes, and this has been reported, and then the whistleblowers lose their jobs. So it's coming from all sectors. It's about conduct, it's about your personal integrity, it's about the way you want to get the job done. And if you want to do it from an ethical and a moral perspective and do it right, then you will acknowledge when something's wrong and fix it. But many of them want to continue that bad behavior that they have, either in defrauding the organization, in hiding certain amounts in their accounts, or whatever irregularities there are. So I would agree that it's actually coming across all sectors. It's not just public.
It does seem, very lastly and very shortly also from your side, that there's this culture in South Africa of corruption, and it's so widespread, as we know. And do you think will there ever be a safe space then for whistleblowers unless we go to the root of this problem?
Indeed, we need to actually create a safe space in organizations for people to speak out when they notice anything is wrong, and it can be discussed, and not where the person is victimized the minute they raise the issue. And once this can happen in all, in communities, in churches, all across the board, at schools, schools start with the bullying behavior on the playground, which then materializes to bullying in the boardroom. So if those spaces can be created, safe spaces, or where people can have these conversations of discussing these issues. Just imagine then that the action around that would be, let's listen, how do we fix it? What do we do so this does not happen again? Rather than penalizing the person and ousting them and pushing them completely out of the organization. Obviously, there must be methods of how do you manage when people are being deliberate or malicious, versus someone who has picked up something honestly and clearly sees there's something wrong and it would damage the reputation of the organization. How best do we manage that? So I think that would be the challenge that most organizations need to do, change the culture to create the space for people to speak out and manage it far more effectively without judgment, and then manage it within your policies and your procedures.
Thank you so much for your time. Of course, that was Cynthia Stimpel from Whistleblower House. And whistleblowing, of course, it's a powerful anti-corruption tool and it needs to be utilized. But of course, if our whistleblowers can't be kept safe and not be assassinated, as we've seen, then, what is the point of all of it?